Welcome to Confronting Injustice. I'm your host, Linda Solomon, joined by my co-host, James Watson. It is our pleasure today to welcome our guest, Robert Aldrich. Robert is the founder of the Actual Innocence Project. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And can you, Mr. Aldrich, can you tell the viewers a little about yourself?
Well, my name is Robert Aldrich, and while incarcerated, I assumed the name of Amir Ansari, which means Prince of Helpers. This was well over 30-odd years ago. I spent probably about almost 35 years of my adult life incarcerated, in and out of prison, but in total about 35 years of incarceration, starting at the age of about 18 and a half. While incarcerated, I went to college, I went to school, I learned several different trades. I became socially aware. I got involved in a lot of programs, such as the African American Coalition Committee, which is one of the largest African American programs in the prison system in Massachusetts. Through that program and other programs, I became consciously aware of myself and much more aware of society as a whole.
Good. Can you tell us, you are the founder of the Actual Innocence Project. Can you tell us what that project is and what inspired you to start it?
Sure. When I came to prison back in the early 80s, I went to prison for burglaries, antiques. And when I first came to prison as a youth, 18 and a half or so, I met a lot of prisoners of different categories, people who were convicted of murder, rape, robberies, drugs, and so forth and so forth. These are people I've never knew before. And during my experience, throughout the years of studying law, one thing that I became is quite adroit at interpreting different laws. And that was a way that I became somewhat what they call a jailhouse lawyer. And while working as a jailhouse lawyer, I started finding that there were people who were actually innocent. First, like most people in society, I didn't believe anybody was innocent. I believed that anybody who was in prison deserved to be there. They were convicted, they committed a crime, they needed to be removed from society. What I later found was that there were people who were actually innocent. It was mind-blowing for me. I could not imagine being in prison for a crime I did not commit, for murder or rape I did not commit, and serving possibly the rest of my life in prison. Sometime in 2014, 2015, I started working with a group of men at MCI Shirley, and I found that these men had declared their innocence. And as I started investigating and researching their cases, I started finding that, these men were actually innocent. Without disclosing any names, I found that there were groups of men that were serving life sentences that were allegedly co-defendants, but only one person committed the homicide, but 4 and 5 other people that was in that group was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
And you told me about, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but a group of young Cape Verdean men who, can you share that just very quick? And I don't mean to distract you, but I was just so taken by that story.
Yeah, well, some time ago, there were some group of you. Okay, first of all, you got to know what the politics are in society. Gang violence was on the rise. Gangs were well known on the West Coast, California, that area over there, possibly Texas and Chicago and all those places. Gangs were not as pronounced here in Massachusetts. So as gangs started to spread across the country in the late 80s and early 90s, Massachusetts' approach to the increase in gangs was to expand the law There was a thing called the community gun, which one kid could put in the bushes and 5 kids could access it anytime they want. And then there was some cases that happened in Massachusetts, like you said, Cape Verdeans, and without mentioning names, that were there were teenagers that caught up with a violent act, and I believe it was the Uplands Corner area. And what happened was, one kid may have, and these are teenagers now. When I say teenagers, they were like under 16. And one kid like whistled at a woman or something, made some kind of, cat call at the woman, and the boyfriend or the husband, whoever he was, he got upset about it and addressed the kids, and the kids kind of like jumped on him. They got into a fight. It's a grown man with young teenagers, and I believe one of the kids, I believe, stabbed the guy, and he bled to death. He didn't just die from the stabbing, but he bled to death by the time the ambulance got there. Well, all of the kids that was involved were prosecuted under a joint venture kind of theory, in which all of them, well, not all of them, those who pled guilty, pled guilty, but the rest of them were sentenced to life in prison for what one person did. And this is what happened in Massachusetts. So when they expanded this law, the joint venture law, so to speak, there are a lot of people in prison that are serving life sentences, never to be released until death, and they didn't commit the homicide. And I think society just said back then, good, this is our way of dealing with gang violence. But in actuality, the prison numbers swelled. And the age number of people who were serving life sentences, it was went from 30 and above to 26 and below. So now you have the prisons are now full of these young men who are serving life sentences without the possibility of parole, simply because they were at the scene of a particular crime, or at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Interesting.
Wow.
So as a result of that, when I started looking at some of these cases, first of all, I was completely amazed. I was completely amazed that there were so many of them. 1 or 2 infamous cases, okay, we kind of saw that, we kind of tracked that. But when you have 30 or 40 of these cases, connected to 3, 4, 5 men, now you're talking over, possibly over 100 people, 100 men who are serving life without the possibility of parole for a homicide they never committed. And I think society has overlooked that part. When you see a number, like if you went to MCI Shirley, MCI Walpole, or MCI Concord, and you look at the statistics and they say they have 350 men serving life sentences, there's an assumption that there's 350 men who were convicted of murder, right, who committed murders. But in actuality, when you look into their cases, probably half that were men who were just simply caught up in that joint venture situation.
Present at the scene of the
Present
crime.
at the scene of the crime, correct, and did not commit the homicide. Okay. And so when I started looking at that, I said, wait a minute, these men are actually innocent. In other words, the government knew or should have known that these men were actually innocent. However, they still chose to prosecute them under the idea that if you don't cooperate with the government, then we'll punish you, and we'll sentence you to the same sentence as to the actual perpetrator of the homicide. This is what their response was to the don't snitch culture that was developing as a result of the transformation of our society with gangs. So when I started working with the Actual Innocence Project, it's different from the Innocent Project, which I commend the Innocent Project for being able to use DNA to prove the innocence of men and women. I think that that's magnanimous. DNA has changed everything. everything. You know, if it wasn't for the DNA, development of DNA, a lot of people would probably end up dying in prison.
Right.
But the actual innocence is something a little bit different. It's like the government actually knew before these men or women went to trial that they were innocent, but yet they still prosecuted them.
That makes such a statement. For some people, that may be difficult to believe, because how does anyone who is civil-minded or even compassionate send someone to jail for something they didn't do or didn't have any control over?
Well, I think that society what society does is puts on blinders. You know, they work from a position of, get rid of them all, let God sort them out kind of attitude. Until it's their child, or until it's their daughter or their son that gets caught up in this, and those voices are squelched. They're supplanted by the voices of murder victims. There's a lot of movement. Mothers against drunk drivers. There's a lot of movements out there where the mothers are coming forth, stating that their son or their daughter was murdered. And there's a difference here, and this kind of like comes into the school of thought. Like, as you know, there's several schools of thoughts. There's restorative justice and there's retributive justice. And retributive justice is punishment, without, pretty much without mercy, without even looking at, what's going on behind the scenes. This is retributive justice says we must make society safe, therefore punish all of them.
But in actuality, does that really work? Because the victim is not addressed.
Right.
I mean, the victim's family is not, punishment, this system has just resulted in massive incarceration.
Exactly. This is some of the things that happen as a result. This is what happened. This is how mass incarceration, this is how it actually began. People seem to not remember what happened in the early 90s when now President Biden, who was the vice president to Clinton, created a bill to increase, it was a crime bill, but to increase the punishment. There was one in particular item on that bill. It was 1:100 ratio. So that 1:100 ratio that was placed in cocaine, by the way, and that 1:100 ratio was one of the reasons why the prison population swelled. And when I say swelled, I mean federal and state. The states follow suit with the federal government with the mandatory sentencing for drug possession and so on and so on, even though we know that the use of drugs should not have been a crime. That was outlawed back in the 60s. But simple possession turned into distribution, turned into mandatory sentences, blah, 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 blah. So if you remember, this current president, President Biden, is the one who created that bill and submitted it, and then President Clinton signed off on it. So everything changed in the early 90s, and right after that is when the prison population swelled to over 1 million.
Wow. Wow. What is the old saying? As long as you lock up one.
Yeah.
Right. What is the saying? I just can't get the top of my head. Then let 5 go free.
Oh, that's, yeah. I don't know where it came from. I read it somewhere where it said, I'd rather release 10 guilty men than to incarcerate 1 innocent man. And I feel the same way. And this is why during my jailhouse lawyering, so to speak, I started working with men who were actually innocent, because I felt as though that, they didn't even deserve to be there, in no way, shape, or form. Just being at the wrong place at the wrong time or caught up in the swell of politics at that time. So when the Actual Innocence Project is just that. I was working with men who were serving life sentences who did not commit the homicide. Let me make this very clear. They did not commit the homicide. Someone else did, and the government knew that they did, but they still gave them a life sentence.
Wow.
Without parole in some cases. So I started doing my unofficial survey while I was at MCI Shirley, and I found that there was dozens and dozens of men who were serving life sentences without parole. But the interesting part is when I put together the package to start the Actual Innocence Project, the Department of Correction reviewed the package, and then they rejected the package because it was the opinion of the Department of Correction, or the position of the Department of Correction, that there was nobody incarcerated who were actually innocent.
But that's been proven over and over again to be untrue.
True, but they would not take that position because then they would have to, being a political governmental entity, then they would have to investigate those men, those cases. And then there's a separation between the executive branch and the judicial branch. And the Department of Corrections comes under the executive branch of government.
Now, there's now that being a victim of wrongful conviction.
Right.
How about the family?
Well,
Who's also have to suffer because now the case becomes a cold case.
agreed. Now, when you say the family, you mean the victims' families?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where restorative justice is supposed to work its best at. I mean, restorative justice is making not making the family, or victim's family, whole again, because you can't, because the person obviously have been murdered, so to speak. But the victim's family need to get closure, and if they find that this person did not actually commit the homicide, that means the person who did commit the homicide is still, is still in the streets or still out there somewhere. And so now the victim's family could possibly go back into, to be frightened. Say that, the person who killed my son or my daughter is still out there when I thought it was, this other individual, come to find out it wasn't. Right, so the government has yet to do, when I say the government, I mean the system, so to speak. The system has yet to address that. They may have overturned some convictions because there's a change in the laws today, and the movements, the Black Lives Matter movements, and the George Floyd, and all of these other movements that shed light on the
injustice.
Yeah, the injustice of the system, as your program is, Confronting Injustice, and that's a perfect name for that, because there is an other side to this that we often don't talk about. Right. But like you just said, the family of victims, there should be a different approach, not the approach that we dealt with in the past, because there was an assumption that this person committed the homicide. Now, when you find out that this person did not commit the homicide, what's the, how do you address that with the family? What's the remedy there?
Yeah, and I'm still waiting to see if there's really any remedy, because if people have been let on for so long to believe we got the guy, justice will be served. Right. And this will, we're sorry for your loss. Realizing at the same time that they know they have the wrong man or the wrong woman. Right. Or the wrong child. Right. Locked up.
Right. Well, it makes me think, you said that when you proposed the Actual Innocence Project to the institution, their position was no one's innocent here.
Correct.
And so it makes me think about this idea that, or research, even when faced with the truth, people generally hold on to what they're accustomed to holding on to, even in the face of the truth.
Correct.
And I think it speaks volumes that people don't really want to be rattled. They don't want their narrative to be shaken, and to think that there are actually innocent men and women sitting in jail right now. That's a problem.
Well, I most certainly agree with you. I think the biggest part of that is that because we now know that there are people who are actually innocent, who's going to be held accountable? See, somebody has to be held accountable for that, whether it's the prosecutor, whether it's the police, whether it's the criminal legal system. Somebody needs to be held accountable. Not just that that person should be compensated, that goes without saying, but who should be held accountable for that? And then there's these particular laws called immunity and qualified immunity, that immunity, absolute immunity, judges have absolute immunity, prosecutors have qualified immunity, but there is yet to be any prosecution of judges or prosecutors for the wrongful conviction of men and women. And that's something, that's a whole nother discussion, because the legislators created these immunities in order to perpetuate the legal system, so to speak, and to insulate these people from this kind of prosecution. And that's the problem.
Yeah,
So,
let me just, I have to repeat this as often as I can. 70% of men and women who are exonerated because of prosecutorial misconduct.
True.
Like prosecutors intentionally, deliberately withheld information, coerced people to lie. So it wasn't a mistake. Like in your case, it was not a mistake that you spent 40 plus years in jail.
And they knew from the start that they had the wrong man, but proceeded to continue with the procedure of trying to convict me.
And no one is held accountable for that.
And accountability has been abolished. There's nobody been held accountable.
Well, you know, there is a different trend today. Like this conversation probably would have went nowhere 30, 40, 50 years ago.
We wouldn't be here.
Right, we wouldn't even be here. But today, you know, there is a lot of support to, and a lot of support and a lot of interest in dealing with structural racism. Let's just start from that point instead of being all over the map here, because we know structural racism has history going all the way back into the slavery period, the black codes, and so on, where laws were specifically created for certain groups of people, black people, maybe Hispanic people, and so on and so on. So the United States has a history of creating these laws. Let's deal with the reality of what we're working with. So today, as far as prosecutors are concerned, qualified immunity means just that. They now have to qualify themselves to be entitled to immunity. But most attorneys will not go after them.
Okay, we have only a few minutes left. Okay. How would you like to close? Is there anything that you would like our audience to know?
Well, I'd like to leave the audience with the understanding that the Actual Innocence Project is fairly new. We're just getting it off the ground. We're going to reach back into the prisons, and we're going to try to do some surveys to find out men and women who are actually innocent, and bring this to the powers that be to see if they will take the initiative to look into these cases. And then if not, then we'll go ahead and we'll bring these issues to the court on our own.
If anyone would like to be involved in your project, is there, could you use
information that they can?
Yes, right now, the Actual Innocence Project, you can contact my company is Boston Paralegal Services. You can contact me, Robert Aldrich, that's ALDRICH 20@gmail.com. And whoever's interested or wants some information on that, you can email me, and I'll plug you into what's going on with us. And we need all the support we can get.
Absolutely.
You know, anybody wants to support this real, genuine issue. This is not fake. This is not make-believe. If you really want to support freeing people who are actually innocent, who should not be incarcerated at this time, then please do so.
Right. And you know, Robert, it's we didn't even talk about the fact that you are a paralegal and have helped many men and women, and have been doing that for. Yeah. You did mention, but not that you have your own company.
Right.
And so you have to come back.
Sure.
And we'd love to hear more about the history of this whole criminal justice system.
Sure.
But we thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
This has been Confronting Injustice. On behalf of my co-host, James Watson, I'm Linda Solomon. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Okay, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.